So, one of the more interesting design choices BHVR decided to go with when creating Dead by Daylight was choosing to not give survivors their own unique abilities, like they did for the killers. Of course they have their teachable perks, but so do the killers, who, unlike survivors, also have a unique ability. And since, as the name implies, teachable perks can be taught to any survivor, giving them unique perks isn't actually a great substitute to having a unique role. This is why giving the survivors a difficulty level and basing it off of their unique perks doesn't really make sense to me like the ones for the killers do. However, BHVR chose to still include them for the survivors despite this, which indicates to me that their initial plan maybe was to incorporate survivors having their own abilities, especially when you consider that every single game similar to Dead by Daylight did so to some degree. However, I think it's safe to assume that with as small as BHVR was as a company initially, committing to such a daunting task may have proven to be pretty difficult for them down the line, so it makes sense that they chose to go this route instead. And given the success of the game, I doubt they regret it too much. In fact, whatever the reason may be for them going this route, one thing this method allows for sure is actually focusing on the survivor's lore instead of just their viability. I think we can all agree that this makes picking our survivor main a lot more lax and definitely less stressful than it is for killer, or practically any game where characters play differently. And in an asymmetrical game where it's inherently unbalanced, it definitely helps to not have the survivors worsen the balance offset. But the fact remains, Dead by Daylight is a game, and one of the things about video games that excites us the most are unique gameplay mechanics. This is essentially confirmed by the fact that killers bring the most intrigue to the table with every new DLC. So even though, at this point, the game is way too far established to implement a change as huge as giving every survivor their own ability, it's still very exciting to consider what the game could play like if it were a thing, which is why, for funsies, I came up with a concept that I think does a pretty good job at creating a unique feel to every survivor, playstyle-wise, in a way that stays true to their character without going overboard and completely changing the mechanics of the game. The concept is as follows. Survivors continue to have their 3 unique perks. Each of these teachable perks, i.e. not ones like Spine Chill or Barbecue, now have a 4th tier level of rarity. However, while still teachable to other survivors, only the perk's respective owners can acquire the 4th tier perks, and the way they acquire them is by consecutively prestiging. For example, Dwight has his 3 teachable perks: Bond, Prove Thyself, and Leader, right? Each of these have 3 tiers of rarity to them currently. However, for Dwight exclusively, these perks would have a 4th tier, and the way he would get them is by prestiging. So he would get Bond tier 4 as a prestige 1 reward, Prove Thyself tier 4 at P2, and Leader T4 at P3. Now don't freak out, because even though incorporating this would entirely be to make survivors feel as unique as the killers already do, these tier 4 perks would apply to killer teachables as well for the sake of balance. So yeah, aside from the obvious, this concept would actually accomplish a few interesting things. First, survivor difficulty levels would make more sense. This is because there would now be incentive to try to use as many of a survivor's unique perks within a single build, whereas currently I don't think there's a single survivor whose perks have good enough synergy to try to make work together, so no one tries. Second, players would have more variety in their builds. Providing a sense of viability for specific character perks would result in a shift from the oversaturated meta builds. This is because people would want to try to make different builds work with as many pink perks as they can, which in turn adds a whole other layer to the mind game of chases, because you'll now have to try to determine if the survivor or the killer is using their tier 4 perks in a respective meta build, or if your opponent is using your knowledge of their character's pink perks against you in some clever way. Third would be prestige incentives. Currently, prestiging characters feels incredibly pointless, so much so that many people opt to not even prestige at all. Firstly, the amount of grinding it takes to acquire enough blood points to prestige every character is astronomical, and to do it 3 times each is almost pure insanity. Not only do you lose all your perks, items, add-ons, and offerings every time, but the only reward you actually get for doing this is a bloody cosmetic that you can't even use on your favorite skins. At this point, there just really isn't much of an incentive to prestige your characters aside from being a completionist, which is why giving these pink perks as a reward for prestiging would definitely make it feel more worth it to a lot of players. The fourth and last thing this would accomplish is having pink perks again. I'll admit this one is purely a quality of life change that not everyone necessarily cares about, but a lot of us definitely do. In fact, some people even changed their game's internal code to get cool perk icons. And for those of you who might not have known, the reason they removed brown and pink perks in the first place was because of a coding issue they had, which prevented the blood web from working correctly. But assuming there's not more to it than that, then this shouldn't be an issue. This is because, unlike the old pink perks, these ones would be their own new tier of rarity. And since they would be acquired by prestiging instead of being found in the blood web, this shouldn't result in the issues they had before. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the concept, but as a final attempt to convince you that this would be such a fun addition to the game, I've actually made builds for almost every survivor that uses at least one of their pink perks. Some of you more perceptive viewers may have noticed that the gameplay footage in this video actually shows me utilizing some of these builds as kind of a proof of concept, so definitely check them out if you'd like to see how they work. And if there's enough interest in it, I might even make separate videos showcasing each survivor's builds in more detail. But for now, what I've done is I've made some character cards to give you the general idea. This, I hope, would help you see how fun it could be if survivors did have their own role, or at the very least motivate you to try out some of these not so meta, but definitely still fun builds in the game as it currently is. I'm still working on some characters though, and I'll be posting them to my Twitter as I finish them, so make sure to go follow that if you want to see them, and some other concepts I've made in the past. But for now, I hope you enjoy these ones I have ready for y'all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the fog.